What happened here in the summer of 1940? 2. Bernburg. Family trees. The beginning of a guided educational tour of Gedenkstadt Bernburg, part of what is still a working psychiatric hospital in a town of 40,000 in Saxony-Anhalt, Germany, includes a brief history of eugenics. Even before 1933, family trees of disabled persons were used as graphic evidence that inferior persons reproduced more rapidly than the healthy. Perhaps the most famous of these family trees was U.S. eugenicist Henry H. Goddard's The Kallikak Family, from the Greek kalos, beautiful, and kakos, bad, published in 1912 and spread internationally. In 1920, German psychiatrist Alfred Hoche and jurist Karl Binding published their treatise, Permitting the Destruction of Unworthy Life, which became the blueprint for what happened during the Third Reich. In the treatise, Hoche writes that killing the mentally disabled is not equated with killing another human being. The guide shows a slide of the optimal Aryan race, tall, blonde, blue-eyed. Then, with a magician's sleight of hand, what we see morphs into the Nazi leadership, short, dark-haired, swarthy. What the guide doesn't tell us, Joseph Goebbels, Reich Minister of Propaganda, was born with a club foot. Hermann Göring, creator of the Gestapo and commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe, was drug-addicted. Hitler himself had Parkinson's disease. Listening to the guide talking about racial ideals, I think of how, in my classes on disability representation, I ask students to create a list of what they think of as ideal or normal. When we post the lists in front of the class, I ask who in the class could be deemed ideal or normal. In my over 2 decades of teaching, none of my students have raised a hand. In 1875, a central psychiatric health and nursing home was opened for the Duchy of Anhalt. Initially designed for only 132 patients, the number quickly increased to more than 400, which repeatedly led to extensions. Because of the many extensions, the brick buildings, one with a large smokestack, the Bernburg site could be mistaken for a factory. During World War I, lack of resources, smallpox and typhoid epidemics, and hunger toward the end of the war reduced occupancy. Patient death rates increased, but in the 1920s, the situation for patients improved. In the summer of 1940, when it was decided to close the T4 killing center at Brandenburg and move it to Bernburg, for the next 3 years, the institution was divided into therapeutic hospital and the health and nursing home, which was the killing center. In the basement of what was Men's House 2, a small room was lined with tiles and 2 stationary incinerators were installed. Between November 21, 1940 and August 1941, more than 9,000 men, women, and children were transported by anonymous-looking gray buses and murdered on the day of their arrival. Their dead bodies were burned. In 1942, after the official end of Aktion T4, Bernburg became part of Special Action 14F-13, the program that killed concentration camp prisoners deemed too weak to work. Around 5,000 concentration camp inmates were killed at Bernburg. Those murdered included Jews, Roma and Sinti, Jehovah's Witnesses, and so-called asocials, professional criminals, political detainees, and homosexuals. In late summer 1943, the Euthanasia Anstalt Bernburg was dissolved. It is in the basement where I first meet Ute Hoffmann, who for over 30 years has been the director of the Bernburg Gedenkstätte. In an interview with David Mitchell, professor at George Washington University, whose film Disposable Humanity is about Aktion T4, Frau Hoffmann says in the 1970s there was a new director of the hospital. One of the leading physicians said, "We can't just let the history of the hospital go unknown." He asked the staff if anyone was interested. Frau Hoffmann's mother was on the staff. She says, "The people working here didn't have time to do research. At the time, I was a history student. 'You're studying history,' my mother said to me, 'so you're the one who has to go to the archives to get the information to create the memorial.' It was another time. You did what your mother says, so I went to the libraries." One day, Frau Hoffmann's mother told her there was a gas chamber. She says, "For me, gas chambers were located in concentration camps, not in hospitals, but I knew my mother wouldn't joke about something like this." It was a strange situation. Around the gas chamber was regular work and therapy, everyday life going on. Work therapy was done right in front of the gas chamber. Among people talking loudly, there was the gas chamber. For me, it was quite shocking and unbelievable. I was pretty young. It took some time for me to realize this was true. The hospital had been redone to hide what had been set up for mass murder. According to Frau Hoffmann, in the 1970s, all of the rooms except the gas chamber were used for various purposes. There were activities. In the autopsy room, they were making baskets. In the hallway, they made books. They stored flowers. When Frau Hoffmann became the director of the memorial, from photographs she redesigned the site to how the killing center was laid out. The autopsy table was reconstructed. The gas chamber remained as it was, Frau Hoffmann says. The only thing that was altered was the insulation of the heat pipes because it was all connected to the whole institution. The lighting system was changed. When they had left the gas chamber in the 40s, they had built a wall around it. I had the wall dismantled. Frau Hoffmann says that in the gas chamber, about 70 people could be killed at the same time. They had elevated the floor to make the volume of the room smaller. The same person, E.B. Lambert, who built the larger gas chamber at Grafeneck, built the gas chamber at Bernburg. Frau Hoffmann talks about those who worked at Bernburg. 130 people worked here. Most applied voluntarily. Some were referred by local job centers. Most lived here and it became an isolated community, segregated from the city, as well as from the other hospital staff. They spent leisure time together. People got married, had children. On weekends, they made tours together, many times using the transport buses. They had contacts with staffs at other T4 centers. They played volleyball and other games with staff of Pirna Sonnenstein. When asked if the staff knew what the jobs would entail, Frau Hoffmann says, the staff came mostly from Brandenburg. The majority knew the job description. Some who were sent by the work authorities didn't know, but only 2 secretaries quit, and nothing happened to them. David tells Frau Hoffmann his students are perplexed at how a memorial to patients could be part of a working hospital. This is the result of historical events, Frau Hoffmann explains. If there could only be a memorial, there would be a pragmatic problem. Every psychiatric hospital would have to close down, as some kind of killing took place in almost all of them. Frau Hoffmann talks a bit about Irmfred Eberl, who came from Brandenburg to be head physician at Bernburg. Eberl eventually went to Treblinka. After his brief and unsuccessful time at Treblinka, he returned to Bernburg for a short time. Frau Hoffmann describes Eberl as a true believer in National Socialism. In 1944, he joined the Wehrmacht. After the war, he continued to practice medicine. Eberl was arrested in 1948. He hanged himself to avoid trial. Memorials are not only talking about the past, but also the present, Frau Hoffmann says. In that light, it is actually a good way of informing people about psychiatric disabilities, the reality of living with disabilities, and also to work against prejudice and stigma. Because when people come here, they see it's just a hospital, just like other hospitals. It is a way to bring the history of euthanasia into the minds of people today, to make it public. This is quite a good interconnection. In the room with the autopsy table, I remember that some patients, as they were measured and weighed, were also marked so their bodies, when dead, could be paid special attention. Most of these were to learn more about epilepsy, Frau Hoffmann had said. Outside the autopsy room, I notice a tile path in the middle of the otherwise concrete floor leading from the gas chamber to what was the crematorium. I ask Frau Hoffmann about this. Easier for the staff to drag the dead bodies, she explains.